Everyone, welcome to quarterfinal number 2 here at Masters Tour Jönköping Online. My name is Frodan. I'm joined by Derek Brown. It is Championship Sunday. It is time to crown a winner for our third Masters Tour this year, featuring $500,000 US. And we have today coming up for you 8 players, but specifically these 2 players, Habugabu and Rami94. Rami, a newly minted America's Grandmaster, which in his words is the weirdest timeline, but he could even go beyond this. It doesn't even just have to be a top 8. It can be a complete championship victory. So for those who are paying close attention to Grandmasters, this is the beginning of the road for Rami's journey heading into Season 2.
Yeah, I think he's already made himself a few fans out of the pro community when there's been, some whisperings of discontent that some of the pro players say, he's a very much a newcomer. We haven't heard much of him. Does he belong here in the Grandmasters program? But already silencing them by admitting to take the mickey out of himself a little bit. So I'm sure he will make a good fit amongst the pro community. And of course, yet another Argentinian Hearthstone player, just further cementing them as pretty much, I think, at this point, the strongest of the Latin American countries.
Yep. And, we take a look at how Americas has performed, and it seems like in the past year in particular, we've been talking about it for years now, but specifically from 2019 to 2020, in the Masters Tour program, it seems to be the rise of LATAM in general. So, not surprising to see another player from Argentina in particular, a country that has been well represented in Grandmasters through PMC and now Gdan. Another player able to make it. And you love to see it. Both players having the webcams. I'm already liking this guy. They're putting the effort. They may pretend like they are, a little bit disconnected. They may act like they're a little bit jaded and bitter, and they probably are from grinding so much Hearthstone over the years. But it seems like the passion and the effort is clearly there. As Rami already taking notes, I'm liking what I'm seeing already. But this is yet before he plays the first card, Derek. So we'll go ahead and see what happens in this Demon Hunter mirror to start things off.
Still one of my absolute favorite matchups at the moment. I was grinding a whole bunch of them last night because not wanting to disclose how many digits there are next to my legend rank, but there's a lot of them round about where I'm floating, so I'm getting a lot of practice in this particular mirror, and I'm already liking what I see from Habugabu. Generally, you are looking to find the more proactive cards, but I think the exception is, of course, Twin Slice, primarily. It's just like the strongest card in the matchup, and I-Beam when it's on the left. That is the exception when you're allowed to keep it, because against the most recent inclusion of Bone Chewer Brawler, this card can be insane.
Right. Bone Chewer Brawler has been a high impact card in the mirror in terms of just disruption and also sometimes getting just a little bit extra damage. And you're talking about some of the most aggressive decks in the metagame. Tempo Demon Hunter is on top, if not the king. And therefore, pushing an extra 2, maybe 4 damage at times can be that big difference maker in a matchup like this. Now, that being said, is it something that you put out this quickly? Possibly not, just because he does have a mid-range curve as well. But, when a slow start like this ends up happening when neither player has the 1-drops, what do you think ends up becoming more important here, Derek?
Well, I think having the ability to go for the longevity with card draw can be important for sure. But one thing that really makes a big difference to me is for Habugabu, the Frozen Shadow Weaver. Because one thing I'm realizing more and more with the Demon Hunter mirrors is that it's kind of like a play in 2 acts, where you have turns 1 through 4, where you're just fighting with your early minions. If one player significantly runs away with that, they win. There's very little comeback for that. But when you're kind of going very even, as we're seeing here, it's who can transition well into the turn 5 plays, the majority of which require attacks with face. And so for Habugabu, having the Frozen Shadow Weaver can be the thing that just completely shuts down the beginning of that second half of the game plan for Rami. So already, I think it could go either way, because Habugabu has himself a slow hand, but a powerful one for sure.
Yeah. And, for Habugabu, we actually didn't get a chance to talk too much about this Finnish player, but we do know that some of Finnish, the Finns' finest, can really hang with the best, and if not, completely dominate the Hearthstone scene. And so he's been very consistent in a lot of qualifiers heading into Masters Tour Jönköping. So not a surprise that, he's able to finally string together a good top 8 here. And he does give a little bit of hesitation. Before this draw of the Battle Fiend, it seemed like he pretty much either had I-Beam and Pass or Frozen Shadow Weaver, but we do understand that Frozen Shadow Weaver is one of the more pivotal cards in the mirror, which is finally starting to catch on as the standard way that you should be playing. In fact, I would say that most Demon Hunter lists just auto-include as part of the core package to have a Frozen Shadow Weave.
I agree completely, and it's one of the tech cards that I'm such a big fan of because it takes so much skill to to play correctly. You're not going to be boosting your win percentage if you're just throwing it down at the earliest possible opportunity every single time. You need to know when it's good, and for Habugabu, I think saving that for turn 5 is the perfect opportunity, and this card that he drew off the top in Kane's Sun Fury is the perfect way to bridge that mana over to turn 5, because now Rami is clearly gearing up for a Glaive-bound Adept, but if he doesn't go for it this turn, it's just shut out by the Shadow Weaver next turn.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of interesting choices here available for Rami. He could end up playing that Glaive-bound Adept. He also just, with that Twin Slice and the Satyr Overseer, could simply grab the board. It is a little more vulnerable to the Warglave's response from Habugabu, so it kind of depends on, one, how aggressive of a stance does Rami want to take, and two, has there been clues as to what Habugabu has been holding in his hand, because he has been playing from the top of his deck and also been relatively passive early game.
It's true. And one thing that this does definitely play around from Rami's perspective is Twin Slice plus Glaive-bound Adept on the other side, because whoever goes for this last is the player who generally is happiest. And you can just see Rami nodding his head here. This is exactly what he was setting up for by Habugabu going for the Glaive-bound Adept. He, in response, Hero Power, coin Glaive-bound Adept, is miles in the lead.
Yep, and you can see that it worked out really well according to Rami's calculations, understanding putting the threat first and using a response card. And it's funny because this is one of the few interactions where you do want to go second in this matchup, or rather the person that responds to the opponent. Generally, it's much better to be proactive, presenting the threats, letting your opponent drain their health, and then you can push the damage. But when it comes to the Glaive Adept Wars, you definitely want to have the final say.
And it's worth saying that Habugabu could have changed the way this works out. The way that this had worked out. The other optional play on turn 5 was to go Hero Power, Twin Slice, and Frozen Shadow Weaver to the face. At which point he could have then killed the Satyr Overseer, left a 2/2 on board, but completely shut out both Glaive-bound Adept and Warglaves of Azzinoth, and then still had the follow-up of Hero Power Glaive-bound on turn 5. Didn't go for that line and is now left with Glaive-bound on the other side, for which he has little response.
Yeah, overall, I like the freeze, and I do think holding onto these 1-drops is much more meaningful now that he has that Altruist in hand. And with the Skull of Gul'dan, that does give Habugabu an opportunity for comebacks. You know, there's not too many opportunities that you get to have comebacks in a quick matchup like Tempo Demon Hunter, but one of them is through things like Skull of Gul'dan and Altruist. So it looks like Habugabu already saying, you know what, I probably am going to fall a little bit far behind. And so I'm going to have to rely on that later in the game.
Ooh, powerful options here for sure. Even Coordinated Strike, which is not oft picked. It's just a clear on this turn to take out the Frozen Shadow Weaver and protect your Glaive-bound.
Yeah, you can actually make a justification for almost any of these.
Yeah, for sure.
Mana Burn, particularly in a tempo-based matchup where you can get 1 Mana Crystal ahead, but your opponent can't even react nearly as efficiently, is already something that I'm considering. Twin Slice, of course, one of the best tempo cards in Demon Hunter, and consequently the game ends up being really powerful.
And for Rami here, his play gives him the best of both worlds. You know, we were saying you could make an argument for any of the plays, and you can see with Habugabu wearing his heart on his sleeve here, just how devastating this is for him. Skull delayed for an entire extra turn is disaster.
Yeah, and, you know, Habugabu has to answer a little bit with Altruist. He doesn't feel like he has that comfort of taking, 10 damage and then trying to make that comeback. It might be too late. And Rami picks up that Warglaves immediately. And, now he has that position where Skull of Gul'dan can fish for the big tempo swing on the following turn, which is oftentimes what you really want to be doing. Playing Skull when you're even or even behind on board is never really the position you want to be in as a Hunter in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, for Rami, the Skull next turn is absolutely insane. If he can find himself a Glaive-bound, Overseer, Warglaives, all of these cards are just absolutely nutty, and he'll have mana to play any of them.
I'm enjoying Habugabu's expressions here. It seems like he's really into it. Perhaps playing his own Hearthstone anime in his head as he draws cards. These options from Paris Scoundrels seem a lot worse than Rami's. However, is there application at all through cards like Blade Dance? That is one of the cards where I slept on a little bit, but obviously I don't think I'm going to put it in my deck, but as a discover option, sometimes situationally, it's exactly what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, it's just about how bad you anticipate your position is here. If Habugabu thinks that he's just dying to burst, then I think the only option you have there is Mystery Choice to hope for Soul Cleave or the I-Beam, of course, for a little bit of extra heal. But because of how much of a dominance he can get on board here, he's basically just saying, please do not have the Metamorphosis or the Altruist or the burst damage in order to push me out of the game. But as we can clearly see, Rami could get it on this turn with the Skull.
Yeah, and the hard thing is he's staring at a ton of damage. If you look back,
yeah,
it is 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 guaranteed damage if he he just kind of left it alone. And of course, with damage potential from the hand, so Rami has to weigh it carefully. Frozen Shadow Weaver and Blowtorch Saboteur will slow it down, but then does it progress his ability to actually win the game on the following turn? Not currently with the state of his hand. It's a tough spot. So in this situation,
it's a really tough spot.
Even if you get Skull of Gul'dan, you get 2-mana cards like Metamorphosis, it's not enough. At least to change the way the game has developed here. He ends up using Frozen Shadow Weaver on the Satyr Overseer just to kind of emphasize how much he really needs to stabilize in terms of his damage count from his opponent.
Wow. This is a lot of damage that is not going face right now, I've got to say. I mean, I guess there's still the chance that he can win back board, and this does mean that he's not really dead to anything on the other side.
Oh yeah. Dance for me, my little puppet. Blade Dance comes down and shuts out the remaining board presence. You can see Rami devastated by that. That is tough pill to swallow. Habugabu with a big grin, realizing that he has turned the corner and is now up to Rami to hope for a Hail Mary in this position.
Yeah, now it means that the only real outs for Rami, Metamorphosis, no longer is good enough. He needs Altruist right now. That's not going to get it.
I-Beam is a potential way. Oh no! From having a devastating comeback, and Habugabu with the pop-off as he gets the Game 1 victory. You can see how much it means to these players. They've grinded, they've had impressive records, none of them losing more than one series in Swiss portion of Masters Tour Jönköping. But for every European player, we have 5 of them today in the top 8. Every single European player, a first place guarantees them a spot in Grandmasters. And for some, they can move up, particularly for players like Deaddraw, who has been one of the most consistent players in the past year of Hearthstone for every competition he's entered. So you can tell that for some of these players who've been grinding since the beginning of Hearthstone, it means a lot to them. Every single win feels like a massive achievement.
It really, really does. And I think it can also bolster their morale a little bit to see themselves as an underdog. Deaddraw has been going time and time again, incredibly impressive results in Masters Tours, probably the best single player in terms of the overall Masters Tour system. Everyone is rooting for him, but for players like Habugabu, who are relative unknowns comparative to that level of stardom, he can just try and prove everyone wrong. That can be his driving force behind upping his play and trying to get that spot in Grandmasters.
Yeah, so overall, a job well done from Habugabu with of course, fortunate pan out with making sure that he set himself up for success and also hoping that Rami fizzled a little bit, which he kind of had some tough spots. In hindsight, I'm sure if Rami knew what his draw order was, maybe he would play a little bit differently and be slightly more aggressive, given that Metamorphosis was like 1 card off from his damage calculations. And I wonder if that's going to change heading into game number 2 as Habugabu returns to his Highlander Hunter, which is yet another more aggressive deck in the metagame right now.
Yeah, I think that Habugabu is looking to be in a good spot. I liked pretty much everything I saw there from him. It was only really that turn 5 with the glaive bound over the freeze that I think is worth taking another look at. But he does have himself here a matchup that you're not happy to see. This is why a lot of the players who have brought Highlander Hunter have actually been banning the Demon Hunter instead of the Warrior, just because it's oftentimes very difficult to get on the board quickly enough to take out the Demon Hunter. But already, Habugabu does have himself a good little hand to be fighting for board early on.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, overall, you got to feel pretty happy if you get one of the 2 1-drops in your deck.
Yeah, that's true.
Or 3, I guess, because he does have Guardian Og Merchant as an addition. A lot of times, the Hunter deck might forego that to play some more mid-range or even top-end threats like no Grand Slam, which I appreciate. If you know that there's going to be a lot of Demon Hunters out there and you're not going to be banning it, you best sure make certain that your early game curve is a lot smoother.
And it says a lot about Habugabu as a player, where he's even showing so much emotion as just when your opponent doesn't have a 1-drop. That is how invested he is in this. Every tiny little advantage he can get just means the world to him.
Most certainly. So with that, this Dwarven Sharpshooter already throwing Rami's game plan out for a loop. Has to evaluate what's the best way to go about this Dwarven Sharpshooter. Is it, you know, taking a more proactive stance like you usually do, or do you want to use Chaos Strike in this kind of position? And both seem very weak.
They really do, especially as... I mean, obviously, I don't think you'll be thinking about Ooze here all too heavily about whether or not I should swing, but it does open up a potential fairly strong play for Habugabu on turn 2. Even though you want to save it for the Warglaives ideally, it wouldn't be bad to take out a 1-2 Umble.
Definitely.
Ooh.
And, you know, the preemptive swing does account for that. Also because it just challenges on board. If Habugabu wanted to spend his entire 2 mana crystals to hero power a 1/1, I think you're happy as a Demon Hunter because you know that most likely you'll either pick up a card that you can play or you can just kind of hero power it down and take tempo back on your side.
Yeah, and that's why he swung, right? Because if that is the plan out, if that is how the game pans out, then there will be a 1/1 Dwarven Sharpshooter left on board for when your Shadow Weaver comes down and you can just take it out very easily.
Right. The exception, of course, is if Habugabu picks up another 1-drop, the second out of 3 in the entire deck, he's able to still maintain that tempo because you can't swing at multiple targets, at least not legally. If you have Warglaives of Azzinoth, that does change things.
You are legally allowed to cheat when you have Warglaives in hand.
Yes, I love that part of Demon Hunter. You get to do a lot of illegal things.
I grow impatient.
Legally.
Is it cold in the shadows?
Yeah, just following the expected plan here, playing around Stormhammer as much as possible, which I think is very smart. There's little that this 2/2 can do, especially if the Desert Spear is frozen as well. So I think it's a very smart play by Rami.
I like it. Rami taking off the jacket, not the gloves though yet. I believe I want to see a stage of evolution. You know, first quarterfinal, take off the jacket. Semifinals, you know, maybe take off like the second layer of the shirt because it looks like it's a little bit cold down there right now. It is winter, I believe, in South America. And then for the finals, he takes off the gloves. It would just be so poetic with what he's doing to level up his gameplay. And it looks like Rami's really getting into zone. Top in. Habugabu not happy to see Demon Hunter hitting his stride right now.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I thought you were gonna say after the grand finals he goes for the dog and just rips his shirt off, greased up as our champion here.
That's season 2 of Grandmasters after Rami has successfully avenged PNC and qualified for his BlizzCon, or his Global Finals rather. But I see where your priorities are, Derek, and I approve of this this timeline.
Yeah, there's a reason that the schedule changed for me and you to be working together, Dan.
If you were to be so lucky. Habugabu with a kind of a frustrated shake of the head. Is it because he didn't necessarily get the cards that he wanted, or he's just kind of upset that the pan out here wasn't what he imagined with such an early curve?
I mean, I think in turns 1 through 3, it was very reasonable to expect he'd be able to hit Faceless Corruptor on turn 5, which is what he was leading up to. And it's gone very disastrously wrong. It's worth saying at this point. The Rotnest Drake with nothing, no dragon to activate it. Faceless Corruptor with a 4-attack Divine Shield minion on board was looking awful. That, however, Dan, could change this entire matchup on its head now.
Totally. And that was another card, too, that Rami was anticipating on 3. You know, just stopping the 3-mana weapons from Hunter helps bridge that awkward transition, because everyone knows from turn 5 onwards, Hunter has some serious threats that can start hitting the board.
Oh, yes.
But it's all about, can you bridge that 1 to 4 mana crystal turns? And now Habugabu with that Desert Spear, you know, contemplating how he can start to fight back for more. I think now that we've held on to the Swamp Ooze, we really got to wait for the cards like Organs of Astronaut that is not playing.
I guess. The fact that he doesn't have many minions in play means that it's not likely to be good, but you have to remember, once the Faceless Corruptor comes down, Warglaves is likely to swing 2 or 3 times before the turn is out, and so then your Ooze isn't getting much value anyway. It's a difficult conundrum.
Yeah, conundrum indeed, because now if he plays the Acidic Swamp Ooze, it still is probably going to lead to his death. Oh, this is such a bad spot for the Hunter, and you can just see, like, we talk about Hunter, its worst matchup by a significant margin, at least from popular decks currently in the metagame, is Tempo Demon Hunter, where it boasts like a, well, not really boast, it's a meager 30-some percentage as Demon Hunter just absolutely destroys the Hunter in this position. And Habugabu had a really good opening hand, I would say, for this matchup, and yet he just completely got clobbered. It didn't even look close.
Yeah, I think that that's the kind of matchup that takes a lot longer than we had in the time to properly analyze all of the decisions that Habugabu could have gone for, because when you're considering how with coins and 1-drops, there's just so many different permutations of how you can go about it. We could have seen coin Zixor on turn 3 would have been a stronger push onto the board on that individual turn. We could have seen just the hero power to try and set up for turn 5, 1-drop coin Faceless Corruptor to wrestle back the board. So many different ways to try and go about it. And I'm sure no one is going to be more critical of that early game than Habugabu himself. But that is the mark of a strong tournament player. You just got to let bygones be bygones and focus on the game at hand.
Right. If he was able to land Faceless Corruptor, then Demon Hunter would either have to give up the board, start burning the face, or trade a lot of their resources, and the game would have been a lot more even, allowing him to potentially survive long enough to play cards like Dine Tamer Brand and potentially end the game. So, you know, a lot of the foundation plays that you set from turns 1 to 4 set the course for the rest of the game. People kind of, you know, point to Highland Hunter as like, well, this is like the easiest deck to play in the metagame. And they could be right. But, you know, you still have to play those first few turns correctly. Otherwise, you build that shaky foundation, and then you're stuck playing reactive, which is what the deck does the worst, I think, out of all the attributes. The comeback tools, there are a few of them, but they're not nearly as effective as other decks.
Yes, I mean, I've heard a lot of different opinions about this deck. Casey, in particular, I think called it a deck by morons for morons, amongst a few other descriptions that I cannot say on broadcast. But he is not a fan and did not have all too much success with it at first, I will say.
Got it.
Exactly.
That's pretty harsh words. You know, Casey, known to be 100% serious 100% of the time.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
No facetiousness at all.
Brutal, absolutely brutal. But now we turn to a Highlander Hunter mirror, if I read this correctly. And that is going to be quite a volatile matchup. It could be one of those things where one player looks really far ahead, they miss their turn 5, and then the other player is like, oh, don't mind if I do win the game. And then the other player starts turning the tide. So, you know, these early hands do look like it's pretty decent on both sides. Rami gets the 1-drop, Habugabu gets a nice turn 2 and turn 3. Is there any specific turns outside of the obvious turn 5 that you also feel like is super pivotal? Is turn 1, you think, one of the also most important turns of this matchup?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that I was going to bring up straight away, is that for Habugabu, I am skeptical, I'll say, of his mulligan choice to hold on to the Fairy Dragon and the Frozen Shadow Weaver, because obviously you want to curve out. It's a tempo matchup where the player who is in the lead will generally stay in the lead outside of any tricksy swings back with Zephrys or Desert Spear. But there is a very, very low curve in the deck. You know, if you toss away Fairy Dragon and Frozen Shadow Weaver, you're very possibly going to find Bone Chewer Brawler, Imprisoned Felmore, Scavenger's Ingenuity, Animal Companion, Diving Griffin, Zixor. The list goes on. And I would say the 2 and 3 drop he has in hand were not premium cards in the matchup. And therefore, trying to look for cards like any 1-drop, Zephyrus, Desert Spear would be a little bit more tempting to me for sure.
Yep, and now Rami has an opportunity to capitalize on this very slow play from Habugabu. Slow in the sense that he didn't end up choosing the curve because the Fairy Dragon would be anti-tempo. And so now he can go for this Animal Companion instead, and he does have a very reasonable curve with the second 3-mana card from the Shadow Weaver and the Bone Raid. And he gets Misha, a very sturdy minion, to intercept the Diving Griffin.
I mean, you say that though, but it was just a Scavenger's Ingenuity played, so 50% of the time he's going to be facing down a 4/6 Zixor, which lines up pretty well against this board. You know, I mean, obviously Rami can trade evenly, and then I suppose just play out his 3-drop, so it's not disastrous. But just say Leok had been rolled here, it would have been a bit of a disaster, I suppose, for Rami.
Yeah, that is fair. I think he has, in his mind, he would still be able to follow along his curve with Frozen Shadow Weaver and eventually just stall out cards like the Zixor. But, I mean, it is a good point. Like, there was a chance that, that Zixor would rain terror on the board for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point there wasn't really much of a good one. I was just saying things are bad. I wasn't really offering a solution of how Rami could better play around it.
Yeah. It's a fair point. Habugabu going for a tracking and finds... honestly, this is a pretty good tracking. Because
yeah, it's not bad.
He's going to be able to pick a card that he wants, which is good for his curve. But he also gets to avoid drawing cards like his Battle Mage later into the game.
Good point.
It's just going to be a dead card altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking Guardian Orc Merchant, even without looking at the specifics too heavily, just seems like the best card at this point because he's got plenty of stuff to spend his mana on. So I'm definitely looking at one of the 1-drops. And the potential for Guardian Orc Merchant is huge in this matchup. Being able to Divine Shield and value trade can just be game-winning on the spot.
Yeah, let's mention that it gives Habugabu a turn 6 option as well. Although, I was thinking about like if he didn't stick a minion. If he stuck a minion, now faces Corruptor is a little bit more valid. However, that Corrosive Breath draw
that's good.
Really juicy.
Yeah, I really, really like this turn from Habugabu. I even like freezing the minion here. I was going to say, generally in this matchup, you want to be freezing the face in order to play around weapons. But this means that it can't be traded in, and then he can just go for a really nice Faceless Corruptor to take it out, even with a Guardian Orc Merchant as well, in order to give Divine Shield. It's looking good for Habugabu, for sure.
Yeah, so from this position, how does Rami choose to respond to the board here? Diving Griffin doesn't give him a playable card for this turn. In fact, the only playable card for minion that's guaranteed is Zephyrus, and I don't know if this is a position where you'd want to play Zephyrus for the remaining 2 mana. It's actually kind of a tricky spot here. It might actually be a tracking to see if he can improve his plays either for this turn or for the following turns.
Yeah.
And then evaluate from there.
I mean, if he can hit Desert Spear off of the tracking, that's like a pretty juicy card to hit. Obviously with Varanus in hand for a huge tempo swing.
Okay.
It's very close.
Yeah, it is close. What I like about Diving Griffin is that, Rami himself has pretty solid cards that he can pick up. Obviously his own Zixor, but maybe even have the Faceless Corruptor too. But this looks pretty bad with the Guardian Orc Merchant getting that damage in and the Faceless Corruptor. We talked about this pivotal swing with 5 mana cards, and this is one of the best.
Yeah. Was this the best order to do it in? Habugabu could have given Divine Shield to his own minion there, but he would have been left with a 4-2, a 4-3, and a 2-1. I guess this is probably ever so slightly better. But he did play it very, very quickly there. Either way, it's a strong turn for sure, and he's very happy about it.
Yeah, I guess for him, it's pretty straightforward. Most attack,
Yeah.
biggest minion, biggest threats. Rami does have... He does have options here to clear.
Yeah.
Swipe for the Zephyrus is very clean.
That's true. Yeah. That's a nice option. I was thinking like diving griffin missiles, but yeah, that sounds a lot better.
Arcane.
Yeah.
Wow, you are a gambler.
I wanted to draw the card. I wanted to spend diving griffin when you had the chance, but yeah, this is much stronger.
Yeah. Obviously, Rami needs to stop the board pressure from getting any bigger, so ends up going for that swipe play. Habugabu picks up his Zigzor, which is very nice for the remaining of his mana, because he did have pretty much no guaranteed way to take it out.
Got to be thinking, of course, about the expected plays now on the following turn, which are Siamat and Dino Tamer Bran. Both of which I would say are fairly weak to going very wide on the board, so I'm definitely anticipating Zigzor double 2-drop on this turn. Just seems like the best way to get attack on the board whilst also playing around the likely turn from Rami.
Yeah, Siamat is definitely a lot better in this position, but you know, kind of like what you're saying, Rami would not be able to get the ideal trades unless he wanted to rush and Wind Fury. He does pick up the Storm Hammer and the Primordial Explorer and his own Zigzor as well. So now it's turned into kind of a small zoo battle where both players taking the small to mid-sized minions and just trying to trade them back and forth.
Ooh, that is a spicy choice now. Unleash the Hounds is full board clear on this turn right if he wants it. But instead he's going for a little bit more value, it would seem.
Yeah, because it's almost a board clear anyways. Brandis Unleash the Hounds is also sort of a pessimistic view. He's 8 health ahead. He's kept relative even parity. And he still has cards like Stormhammer, so I guess in his mind, he wants to use Boom Bully to also disable Habugabu's power cards. If he's gearing up for a card like the Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, Boom Bully will stall it first. And in a matchup like this, stalling for a turn ends up being game-winning a lot of the time. So I think I can definitely understand where Rami's coming from. Oh my God, did he just rip the Sixer Prime?
Hello?
Right after it died?
Oh. I mean, are you holding off for a turn here because it's not quite, well, not quite prime yet?
Nobody move and no one gets hurt.
It doesn't line up well into the big ol' whelp, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa, to the face. All right.
My man.
All right, well, this Dragon Bane... Dragon Bane actually could end up being targeted to the opponent's face if he uses Dragon Bane and Dwarven Sharpshooter, and then, or rather, he preemptively does a bunch of trading, like he trades the Zigzor or trades the Locust Rusher. He can actually guarantee that 5 damage face, which I guess it's kind of the same either way, right?
Yeah, I mean, trading a little bit here, I think, is perfectly fine. He goes with this first because if it takes out the 5/5, you're happy, I think. If it goes face, you're also happy. You're potentially losing a little bit of damage this way, obviously, but it's worth the downside for being able to clear it off with your smaller minions. I think it's a very smart play by Habugabu.
Yeah. So the idea is that Habugabu wants the bigger board, right? Doesn't want to have to trade his minions in if he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
So ends up finding the line, and again, that slight 2 damage missed. He still has very much enough damage here to challenge. And Habugabu's like, "How did you just draw that right after it just died?" And the silly thing is, it still isn't really enough to answer everything on the board. This is one of the most powerful cards individually in Hunter, alongside some of his Highlander cards, and it's still not enough to answer the board. But it's a very nice pickup for Rami. It's just that he still might be under a ton of pressure here soon.
Yeah, very possibly will. It's, I suppose, good news for Habugabu, though, because Rami does not have the great ability to actually take good trades here. You know, the Desert Spear will be able to clear off a couple of them. If he doesn't take out the big ol' whelp, sorry, that all of a sudden is going for a face for a lot. Siamat here as well is insane in its own right.
Whoa, that's lethal, isn't it?
Inner Demon is 8 damage, which is 1 off.
He could be more efficient. Like, for example, Hero Power. Bloodlust is 6. That's still 8.
That's the same.
Fireball's still 8.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I guess he doesn't? Unless I'm missing a card.
There must be a way, right? There's always a way. Wind Fury is off. Blessed Champion is off.
Victory
Is it actually just 1 off lethal?
He's thinking about every possible permutation.
6 damage with Savage Roar, 6 damage with Bloodlust, 6 with Fireball, 6 effectively with Inner Demon as well.
Right. We're just missing 7 damage, right? Or like 1 damage.
1 damage, yeah.
Yeah. Looks like Zephyrus is not smart enough to figure it out for Habugabu. You know, sometimes you just play it, and then Zephyrus like offers you because it sees the board state, and you're like, oh yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
Right, Zephyrus. Yeah, you're right.
Not so here, though. So Habugabu takes the kind of safer play, I suppose, that still puts him in a very good position. Zephyrus has gone for Rami. There's basically no outs for lethal at this point whatsoever, so he's going to have to get there the old-fashioned way.
Oh, but Siamat does give Rami a ward clear here.
Did we really like Holy Nova more than Consecration there? He's at 16 health. He never dies, right?
Right. Putting your opponent to 5 as opposed to 7 seems like a pretty significant break point for Hunter.
Right, yeah. It's close. It's close.
Rami kind of thinking about, is there any application of picking up, you know, some of these bigger dragons versus the mid-sized one? Cobalt Spellkin, I mean, there's some pretty solid 1-mana spells in Hunter. But,
yeah.
I don't think he's going to be able to get to the point where he's playing like Toxic Reinforcements and other cards.
Exactly. The side quests are the duds. It's, you know, the damage that you're looking for, I suppose, tracking as well. It's Arcane Shot, Twin Shot.
Gotta kill this 1/1 to avoid the kill command lethal. But he's just gonna push damage to face because that's what he needs. Dragon Queen draws off the top for Habugabu. However, there is a poisonous minion, and he also forgoes the hero power. So if Dragon Queen Alexstrasza completely whiffs, like Brightwing Fairy Dragon, on the lowest of low rolls, what does Rami do in response? He's got 5 damage plus a trade into the Dragon Queen, and he just climbs ahead.
I think it's still just better. I know that there's the potential downside, but if you go Siamat, Divine Shield, Rush, like, if they clear that off and then you have to go for Alexstrasza, I feel like there's worlds where they can set up lethal on the backswing. Whereas Dragon Queen Alexstrasza with Zephyrus gone, it's just so good. It's so powerful.
It's true, and your average rolls are much better, right? Because they still have to deal with a 5/5 dragons, you know, 7/7s. Oh, it's just gonna go for Siamat. This is an approach that we also saw some players like Surrender really like to go for. Just try to use the hero power and pressure your opponent.
The other thing is, of course, that if he goes with this line, he's not dead to Dino Tamer Bran, whereas with this Alexstrasza, he would be reliant on getting a rush or a healing or taunting dragon.
Well, Sixer's already exhausted, so if he had Zixer Prime, that would have just been absolutely nutty. Cobalt Spellkin comes down, and he needs something huge.
No.
Who knows? But he does get tracking.
Tracking something.
It's too expensive to land a card like the Rotnest Drake, though.
Right. So he can get... Corrosive Breath doesn't get there. Maybe just a taunt if he can get Bone Wraith. That's technically enough.
Yeah, I guess he's just gonna dig to see if anything can change his mind. But with some of his best cards already used, like Zephyrus, gonna have to hope that there's something that can change his mind. And it's
Masterful.
just the expensive cards that he can't play. Habugabu gets game number 3 under his belt and is 1 game away from going to the semifinals.
And the relief is very clear for Habugabu, who was tweeting out yesterday that the final match he played to get through to the top 8 was the most stressful series of Hearthstone that he'd ever played in his life. Understandably so, of course. But now I think every single one is just going to get more and more stressful, because at this point, you have to be getting your hopes up. It's very possible that he could be a Masters Tour champion and a Grandmaster, all in the span of one incredible weekend.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, it comes down to the Quest Warlock for Habugabu. A matchup against Hunter, which is not great, but, you know, Quest Warlock has still been holding steady, even though it's at times looked pretty unstable on stream, where like it feels like it has unplayable hands. Its win rate is pretty even across the board. It is, I believe, the only class at a dead even 50% win rate from the Swiss.
Wow. And I think that's fairly reasonable to expect. There are a few players anymore claiming this to be the best deck in the game, even though that was a little bit of hype a few weeks ago. And I think up against Highlander Hunter in particular, that is where some of the weaknesses show. Because even though the stats for this matchup are not as bad as I originally anticipated, I still just have to go with what I've seen on this one, and it has consistently been really rough for the Warlock.
Yeah, and I think for, you know, Warlock in particular, one of the more interesting things that I'm identifying is that it is beating Hunter more often than losing.
Your soul shall be
In fact,
mine.
it's a
I
slightly
know.
better matchup for Warlock.
Yeah. Which, again, that's what I'm saying. It's rare that I just go hard against the stats. Every time I've seen this on ladder, grandmasters, whatever, it's just looked so bad for the Warlock. When they do win, it feels like they're just scraping over the finish line. But then again, sample sizes need to be very big before you're definitively certain on a matchup. So I'm willing to say that Habugabu has been playing some pretty solid Hearthstone thus far. I think we'll be able to go all the way here and take the win over Rami.
All right, well, you know, he has Plot Twist already, and Rami has a reasonable early curve. Rami's actually, is he thinking about full keeping in this position, Derek?
I don't think so. You're looking for some of the more powerful cards. Fairy Dragon is a great one. Stormhammer can be huge as well, obviously, to get that consistent damage up against the Warlock. As can 1-drops, apparently.
That's right. So, no problem. Just go ahead and get that 1-drop anyways. Bone Chewer, Brawler, Fairy Dragon, both reasonable. One thing that I didn't really think about when playing cards like Bone Chewer, Brawler was application against Warlock if their main defense is Dark Skies.
Right.
That ended up surprising me a lot because I was playing Quest Warlock and my opponent did exactly this. Play a 1-2-3. Had Bone Chewer, Brawler, I was like 1 off from Dark Skies. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I like lose the last hit here and it doesn't hit the Bone Chewer, Brawler, I get manhandled.
Oh. Now has the Dark Skies, and
yeah,
with 9 health on board, it's 1 off from a clear.
Oh, I mean, it's likely to clear the Bone Chewer, Brawler, but I mean, do you want to incur that risk?
Imagine just tanking the 6 next turn.
Right.
It gets even tougher, right?
Yeah.
Because he has the Nether Breath to just go on this turn to, you know, hit either the, I suppose, the Bone Chewer or more likely the Zixor. But he also has Moarg in hand. He really wants to go for both of those together. But then if he does go Moarg, Coin, Nether Breath, then he's just having a weaker Dark Skies. So he just rips it.
Ah, no,
and it survives.
The prophecy.
Oh.
Yeah, we laid it out exactly like this, and it happened exactly like that. 6 damage from the Bone Chewer, Brawler.
It's just a
Habugabu
disaster.
is hurting. Now, granted, he still has some of the best cards for a situation like this. He has healing, he has AoE, he has proactive development. He even has the Hail Mary plot twist in case he needs to, you know, punt and get a different hand. I am describing, of course, using American football terms, Derek. I'm not sure if that necessarily applies to other sports over in your side. But.
Oh yeah, we call that a kick it better, you idiot, in English football.
That's right. That is definitely the expression of the opposing side when they have to punch.
Who to shoot?
So Rami, of course, he knows he's going face with it. The question becomes, how does he actually want to use his mana here? But Evasive Feywing, I mean, that's got to be one of the best cards against Warlock. And yet he chooses to go for the Fairy Dragon here.
Yeah, I think for me that was an Evasive Feywing turn. One of the things that I think Surrender, who's been piloting this Highlander Hunter deck consistently in Grandmasters, has done best against the Warlock, has been not being baited into going for hero powers too early, because you very often end up in this situation where you're weaving in the hero powers, you're getting closer and closer to killing them, then they heal. They go for the Moarg into Netherbreath, and it all just disappears. And at that point, you want to have the biggest, scariest board possible in order to fight back against that. I guess that Rami does have this option of being able to go for the Faceless Corruptor on this board. But the other downside of this play was that Habugabu could have gone for Coin-Crazed Netherwing, and then Rami would have been in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that Rami was, very much tunneled onto what his hand could do, which, to be fair, that's what Hunter often is thinking about. But it's also what you described, where if Habugabu had a slightly better hand, or rather, if he was one card deeper into his deck, that Crazed Netherwing could have completely ruined Rami's plan. And then he would have to kind of play off curve. He would have to either play that 4/4 Rusher or just play the Evasive Feywing anyways. It's a tight scenario, and again, it's one of those like hypotheticals, but overall, it seems like Habugabu's game plan is pretty straightforward. He's gonna go for this Coin Abyssal Summoner,
which is a 5/5, which looks great against these 4/4s, but you know what? It looks 1/3 of the time very bad against Dan.
This Dragon Bane. Oh, Rami knows. Rami knows what's about to happen here. Because I don't think you can justify playing the Evasive Feywing or the Promoted Explorer, and Rami lets it go both players.
Boy.
Praying to whoever is listening.
Oh!
And, that's a pretty significant moment for Habugabu. That was actually the best case scenario for him.
It was, and Rami like, oh man, so unlucky. I know my Monty Hall problems. I can't believe I missed the 50-50.
Actually, was it better for Rami to attack with the weakened Faceless Corruptor and then hero power? Is there a slight optimization opportunity?
Then it becomes a 50-50, that's right. No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it might have given him an opportunity to actually keep a minion on board, but obviously that would have been like a major damage sink if it went poorly. Either way, Habugabu doesn't have too much to do against this Dragon Bane, so he's gonna plot twist.
Yep, trying to draw back those Aranasi Broodmothers. Find the second plot twist as well, arguably.
Oh, but he has to use. He has to float one mana rather. So Rami, of course, disappointed to see that. But now, quite frankly, with double Dark Skies being used, Evasive Feywing, there's not many cards that can actually directly answer that card. You have to basically use AoE or Caladan to take it down.
Okay, well, I mean, we're looking at a potential defensive play. Again, it looks awful, and you're potentially losing your plot twist value completely, but Aranasi Soulfire has to be a consideration right now for Habugabu.
Yeah, and if your opponent has the Rottnest Drake, they have it, but if they don't, the upside is really big.
I think that might just be too bad. I think you're throwing away your entire win condition if you do that. Like, you're more likely to win, I think, if you go tap plot twist, and then just start tapping into 0 mana Alex, 0 mana Twisting Nether, 0 mana Malagos. It's still not likely to get there, I think, but you're just doing nothing if you go for Aranasi Soulfire. Absolutely nothing.
Well, you're trying to address the state of the board, which is important because, what's more likely? Your opponent whiffs on the curve, or you end up just dying because you end up plot twisting. And I think it ends up. Oh, never mind.
I mean,
Although, stat line is annoying for Rami because he doesn't get to go face with his Kingdom Rush. Oh.
okay.
You know, not gonna
I mean,
lie, I kind of expected the down tamer Brand to come down that turn.
Yeah, I mean, he was quite clearly looking for exactly Rot Nest Drake there. But given there's not a class waiting to Discovers anymore, he really wasn't that likely to find it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, that being said, Dragon Moss Skystalker is still a really sturdy minion on the board. It's up
Wow.
going. Oh, I guess he just wanted to play a dragon this turn.
This was, I think, really weird from Rami, because you have to remember as well that both Dark Skies are already gone. Even if the board is cleared there on the following turn, he still has Dragon Queen Alexstrasza to follow up.
Well, one Crazy Netherwing had been discarded, so maybe that gave Rami more confidence to extend to the board, specifically with this stat line.
Yeah. I understand the play he was looking for, and it would have been insane if he had hit the Rot Nest Drake exactly. But outside of that, this play is significantly weaker.
Well, I mean,
Wow.
there's no battle cry, but it's still the best minion you can play, and at this point, you're just trying to get as much momentum on your side as a Warlock.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously he's afraid of Twisting Nether at this point. It's got to be a consideration, but you've got to play your hand as well. I mean, I'm thinking it's just looking to me to be a Dragon Queen Alexstrasza turn and save Dino Tamer Brand for a clearer board to go for the win.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
He doesn't have to play all the dragons if he's afraid of overextending. He could literally just play the Dragon Queen and it probably baits out a Twisting Nether on its own.
Yeah, at the same time, you do get to play Dire Tamer Brand. That kind of does the same thing, and you get to play Dragon Queen the following turn.
Yeah.
Both, you can convince me of both. Habugabu, of course.
Oh!
Happy to see it. Finds Caligo, which doesn't play a free spell immediately as well.
Yeah, that's insane.
Now.
Okay, he's going to hold off on it just because he wants to play around Calidan or Twisting Nether.
So for Habugabu...
Quest.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean...
Okay.
I was going to say he should start off with Plot Twist there, because now he can no longer hit Celadan, and he can no longer hit Twisting Nether.
Talking about
Oh, sorry,
the hero
Twisting Nether
power.
wasn't a possibility beforehand, but Celadan was really his best chance there.
I was going to say he could hero power into Caladan, just like, you know,
I guess.
just the way our Lord and Savior Dean
Woo!
planned it.
Whoa!
Wow! But still has a 3-4 remaining, but he gets to clear off the first wave of dragons. He knows that Rami held the dragon, though. That's still scary.
Is that really stopping you from playing Twisting Nether here? You're tanking 17 damage otherwise. I guess a little bit less with the trade, but
Almost out of time.
that's a recipe for losing, right? I think this has got to be a Twisting Nether.
I think so. I mean, he is dead if he doesn't do it.
Right, yeah.
And you can see how, you know, that simple stat line, that 5-6 on the Dragon Moss Scorcher makes all the difference in the world. People compare Dragon Moss Scorcher to Cairn, and in this case, way better.
True. Very true.
All right, so Twisting Nether used. Does that encourage Rami to extend even further? I actually like the idea of playing Boom Pistol Bully this turn, because that means Celadan can't get answered, and you can
Great
Diamond
point.
Brand from hand.
Yeah, that's a very good spot. I mean, I think you're probably starting... Oh, no, sorry. That's the last dragon. Okay, so you start with Scale Rider, then you go with the Caligos. Good order.
Yeah. The proper ordering. I wonder if there's even a chance to leave it with, like, the Grand Slam.
Whoa!
Okay,
Unleash
that's good,
the
too.
Beast?
He can do it twice, although we do know that he still wants to plan on playing this Boom Pistol Bully.
Yeah, for sure. But then again, bringing it down to 0 would mean that Celadan can be played again if he gets it off the hero power. I mean, obviously we can see that that's not a possibility.
Nobody move.
But from Rami's perspective, it's the one thing that he has to be afraid of. The one thing.
Yeah. And Habugabu devastated to see such a big board. I think these outs are very low. It would have to require a free card of high impact. And that's not it.
Yeah.
Warlock is dead.
Weird game. Very, very weird game there. There were a lot of different ways that Habugabu could have gone about it. You know, obviously, as early as turn 3, when he went for the Dark Skies, we could have seen a Rain of Fire first. We could, Nether Breath first. We could have just seen a tap on that turn to try and set up for the biggest possible Dark Skies on the following turn. And then later on, when he went for the Aranasi plus the Soulfire, gutted his entire game plan in his own right, just for a bit of extra defense. And I've got to say, if Rami had gone for the play of Dynatamer Brand instead, I think that would have been lights out on the spot.
Yep, that's right. So, you know, the Druid and the Warlock matchup does tend to lean towards the Druid, so this is a tough spot. Warlock actually has a even or winning matchup against every class in the Swiss portion except for one. It was Druid. If Druid was removed from the equation, you could even argue that Warlock would be the best deck in the game because its worst matchup is the even matchup against Demon Hunter 50-50 and itself. Everything else is better than that.
Shall be mine.
Wait, no, hold on. There's 2 Paladin games and it won one of them. So 50% against Paladin as well.
Wow, now that is something to put on the fridge.
Oh, wait. And also a losing matchup versus Shaman. It went up against Shaman once and it lost. 0% against Shaman. Ha! Terrible deck.
Well, now we're seeing the matchup that's had an entire show match, an entire Pheno show match dedicated to it, with Radu infamously on the side of the Druid versus Bloodyface. And the conclusion was, after a lot of debate, that players seem to feel like if you hit the ramp as Druid, you're in a very good spot, quite likely to win then. And Rami has already got himself the makings of a very, very powerful hand for the matchup.
True. Habugabu also has a reasonable hand too with, plot twist early. If he gets Sense Demons, then all of a sudden both players will be cooking. No discard?
Very nice. We'll take that. I mean, I kind of think Rami was kind of laughing at how disgusting is right now because he's hit all the ramp you could possibly want. The only thing missing is, I suppose, one of the big threats like Mount Seller or Ysera. But even then, Glowfly into Soul of the Forest is in its own right a very, very difficult threat to answer.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could say that he just wants a dragon, so that Breath of Dreams is a little bit more than just 2 mana draw a card. And here we go, plot twist to immediately ramp up that card draw. Who gets the decisive board state here at the very end of the game? Rami's about to start charging forward. He does have the ability for the Glowfly Storm, but he would be walking into a crazed Netherwing turn. This is something that you always consider as the Druid player. Okay.
Oh. This is the absolute dream for Rami. Habugabu has an incredibly uphill climb in order to be taking the win in this final game of the series.
Yes, although he doesn't actually have that many cheap spells with the Exotic Mount Seller right now. So he does have the ability to go for Glowfly Swarm and the Soul of the Forest next turn. That's like the huge thing.
Yeah.
He just needs a little bit more cheap cards than his hand has like absolutely everything that it could possibly want.
Damn it! He only has 4/5 of the absolute perfect dream hand. How unlucky.
Exactly. One of every 5 times you do end up losing, and that's when it starts to become somewhat befuddling. You're like, I can't believe I lost. This is absolutely unacceptable. I must go to Twitter and @XRHS. 80% is not 100%, and that is unacceptable for my competitive integrity.
Almost out of time.
And I kind of wonder here, like, what can Habugabu do to potentially, answer this? Is he supposed to play Mohawk Artificer ahead of time? You can Nether Breath the face.
Okay, I mean, I can understand why you'd want to go for that instead of Rain of Fire, because that can be very powerful to clear off these boards. But with this coming down for Rami, he doesn't even have the ability to clear it off, even with all of these AoE cards. It is just looking to be coming down too thick and fast for Habugabu.
Well, he does have Rain of Fire, and then he has
Dark Skies. Oh!
So that specific order is actually so crucial.
Fair play to
it
Habu.
looks like he actually does end up clearing everything, but just barely. And it's kind of like we were talking about. The problems are just beginning here.
Yeah, this is it, right? With Mount Cellar, Ironbark, Fungal Fortunes, at minimum, it's looking to be an incredibly powerful refill for Rami, and most importantly, the turn before Twisting Nether.
Okay.
Wow.
That's interesting. Because we're talking about not too many cheap spells, and you could, exotic Mount Cellar, Fungal Fortunes, then just play spells after that. I kind of like the Ysera, though, because you have 2 forms of card draw in your hand. It's a big minion. But it is what you're saying, too. It's turn before Twisting Nether, so if there's a time to play Mount Cellar, now would be the time.
Yeah, I much prefer the exotic Mount Cellar here. For Rami, I think it's just a very, very threatening board that's being developed on this turn. Ysera is generally the follow-up rather than the first wave of threat in this matchup. It's just whether he goes for the Power of the Wild or the Fungal Fortunes here, I think is the real question. And Power of the Wild does make sense, just to get the threatening board down right now. You don't fill up your hand, so Ysera Overflow is still a very powerful option on the following turn.
Oh, geez, King Mukla. That's a lot of stats. 21 on the board right now. Moarg. Artificer, but he only has Nether Breath and the Mortal Coil, and that's not enough.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Yeah, if he
could tap into Soulfire in order to just kill off the Mount Cellar.
I wonder.
Right. The problem isn't that he doesn't actually have enough health. The problem is there's too much burst.
Exactly.
I mean, not even necessarily the threat of Savage Roar. It's just like, this is just a lot of damage on board.
Yeah. Tap Keladan, not an opportunity quite yet. It's like tap Plot Twist, tap Keladan is the best chance he has in order to get this done.
I guess Moarg plus the Nether Breath. And he's alive by his count. There's 15 on the board, Savage Roar's 8, 23, 24 through the hero power.
Potentially just lethal on this turn, though.
Yeah, if he picks up another Savage Roar with this Fungal Fortune, that will be it. Habugabu sitting back, awaiting. That's more damage to the form of Claw.
It's 26 he's got now, as I count it. So Vate Ysera is probably a little bit overkill, because you're definitely expecting Twisting Nether to come down on the following turn. So you probably just want to make use of your spells on this turn and then follow up with Ysera afterwards would make the most sense to me.
Yeah, that does end up making a lot of sense as well, because if he ends up getting Twisting Nether, he has that reload, and if he commits to Ysera, I mean, I guess the benefit of intervening the Ysera is that he could use Overflow afterwards. Oh my, just ditching all the cards.
And it does mean... Yeah, I actually wonder about this from Rami. Starting to think back, I'm wondering if it should have been an Overflow turn play on that turn, because then it would have left him the opportunity to go Ysera, Vate, Fungal Fortunes on the following turn, in order to get an immediate threat onto the board.
Right. Alternatively, it can still actually be the same thing the other way, right? Because he could play Ysera, now he can start overflowing and drawing it, but... I mean, the problems for Habugabu still exist, but he's kind of survived some of the hardest parts of this matchup so far, and he does have... Oh my gosh. I mean, that's tempo. So you can play Kelodan
think you
and
just
develop
rip it.
proactively
Yeah,
behind
exactly.
it. And then you have the potential of like maybe getting a free Alex Straza. I mean, if I'm Habugabu, I'm not too upset or even married to the idea of Kelodan. The only problem is if what happens with that wave of dragons come with the Ysera. And, you know, if Rami plays Overflow, because he's already seen 2 Fungal Fortunes, he would be really sad. But at the same time, Kelodan won't have the secondary part of his battle cry active if he passes this turn because he has it in hand. Kelodan says when you draw it this turn, it destroys all minions. So now is the time to play it if you want to just capitalize onto it. I guess in his mind, it does the same thing both ways. Either he plays it and destroys 1 minion this turn, or he plays it next turn and destroys another 1 minion.
Right, but I mean, now is better than later is, I guess, my thinking. Like, I don't really know if there's a big bunch of dragons on the board if you're going to be surviving for that long anyway. That is...
Holy cow, that's almost lethal.
Pretty close to lethal, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
2 off.
Yeah, and I wonder if he's able to actually do it through an overflow. No, overflow heals his opponent.
Yeah, exactly.
8. Sorry, he has 4 through the Ysera. Savage Roar is another 4. Hero Power is 1 damage, so that's 9. And then 10 to the Iron Bark, 12 to the Claw. Is he 1 damage off?
Oh, yeah, of course, the Iron Bark as well. Yeah, 1 off. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the other downside of Overflow. He already drew 2 of his portals. What if he draws like the other 4 or 5 portals?
Well, he's just got to hope that doesn't happen, I think. Whoa!
Oh, jeez. Oh, my.
Wow! These are premium, my goodness.
He doesn't want to actually draw too many more portals here. He's drawn almost all of them.
Yep, because now the out for Habugabu is activate that Zephyrus or hit the plot twist in order to reactivate his Kelodan.
Yeah. Unless... Nope, Malagos is already in hand.
Yeah.
This is looking bad for the Warlock player. Alex Straza off the top. No active Dragon Queen Alex Straza, which is a bad sign for his chances of having Zephyrus potentially drawn off the hero power.
Yeah.
So many possibilities.
I think tap into plot twist is the out at this point. I'm not seeing anything else.
Yeah, it looks likely.
Oh! Oh!
Oh my gosh. The possibility. He has a full 10-card hand. All he has to do is draw the Kelodan. Zephyrus isn't active. Kelodan comes to the hand.
Oh my god, one final ray of hope here for Habugabu in an already almost unwinnable game.
But it's not over yet because there's still a minion on board. And Rami has Savage Roar and the Claw and the Iron Bar kind of similar to the same
Not
position.
lethal. It's close. It's very, very close, Dan, but it's not there.
Right. And he knows that Habugabu has one last form of AoE. Actually, you know, pretty interestingly, Rami did not draw a Dream Portal, so he still has threats in the deck.
Yep.
He can play proactively with this Mount Seller. I mean, it's already been demonstrated that Habugabu is fishing for opportunities to clear. If he had the Zephyrs, he probably would have just guaranteed it. Porcupine, that's damage.
Huge. That is huge.
Raven.
Never
and
welcome.
Habugabu. Never welcome.
I mean, at this point, the innovates, I suppose you're saving for Glowfly Swarm?
Yeah, I guess in his mind, this is still showing lethal. Also, I think there's a lot of merit to pushing damage to the face. You kind of have the ability to maybe have, like, you know, Savage Roar just be lethal.
None of this is getting him there.
Activation on the Zephyrus.
Malagos Rain of Fire just kills himself.
Dark Skies does 8 damage right now, and there's just way too much health. Habugabu needs to find his last duplicate card in his deck here, and off the top of my head, I don't know what it is. I'm going to look at the deck list.
It's
Is
inactive.
it the Broodmother? Is it the Broodmother?
I guess so, yeah. So he can draw again off of... he has to go Rain of Fire and then Mortal Coil. Yep. He can draw twice after he trades his 2/2 into the Patriarch as well. Still inactive. Gotta draw it again.
He can go for a Frost Nova, though. His last chance! Okay, can he salvage that all? Dark Skies, Soulfire, Dragon Queen, Albatross, something. Something just to salvage it. He gets the 4 damage. But that's going to do it because Rami has the Savage Roar in hand, and Habugabu's dream of being able to advance forward and potentially become a Grandmaster will stop here at the quarterfinal. Rami is going to advance to the semifinals, and what an opening match here for Rami's performance now that he has guaranteed his spot as a Grandmaster. He is winning on broadcast and perhaps a premonition of what's to come in the upcoming season for Grandmasters.
Yeah, damn right, Rami. You deserve to feel good about yourself there. That was a very, very close series indeed. I think there were, for sure, some things that could have been tightened up by a couple of by both the players there. But as I keep saying at this point, for the newcomers, I think any mistakes they're making do not indicate a weak Hearthstone player. They indicate a player who has not hit a deep run in a tournament yet, and the pressure really changes it completely. It's an entirely different story to playing on ladder. And with a bit more experience from Rami in particular, now that he is a Grand Master for the Americas region, I think we can expect great things from this player.
That's right. And, you know, we did see a really good run by Habugabu, but he does end his run here. Rami will advance to play Warma, the lone remaining French player, which is unusual at these Masters Tour. We expect French domination at this point. Yeah. But hey, I guess they only can get one in this time. But on that same note, Warma could win and become the second French player to guarantee his spot in Grandmasters, which actually, incidentally, I think if he does, might actually get us 3 French players into Grandmasters, but we'll have to wait to see how the final standings would look. But it wouldn't be surprising at all. So that's one semifinal to look forward to, but we have just another half of quarterfinals to go through to find out who will be the last 2 remaining players. So with that, that leads us to our next intermission as we get ready for our next series, which is going to be Wild Animal from Russia going up against quite possibly the player to watch in top 8. It is Dead Draw from the United Kingdom. We'll be right back with more Masters Tour Jönköping online right after this.